I want to talk to Josh, who wants to talk about consciousness and how it relates to spirituality. Josh, are you there?
Yeah, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I suppose I want to start by just asking you all, can you just sum up for me in a sentence or two what it is that you believe about the nature of reality? Just because I don't want to make assumptions about your side of the argument.
Ben, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah. So I am not convinced that there's anything supernatural involved in this world or this universe. I am not outright saying that there is none. I'm just saying that there's not enough evidence to convince me that that's the case. So I tend that's how I'm going to frame my position.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with something a bit different, and I'm going to say, I think that there is a reality out there, and let's say it's filled with kind of blips and zips and lots of things we don't understand on whatever level, whether it's a quantum level or whatever. Within that reality arises us, a species who has a shared reality. We've got a shared reality. We see the world different to how an insect sees the world. So as a species, we have a shared reality. And we interpret all those little blips and zips and everything that is out there within our own framework. And we have tools to assess things. And we've developed tools over the years, and those tools relate to our senses and the way we interpret the world. And we've kind of developed these tools which they've got explanatory power. They seem to work in the same way that the universe works, and they're predictive, they can measure things. And I think that is rather than talking about reality, huge global thing which encompasses everything, when we're talking about reality, we have to talk about our shared reality and how we interpret that, because we interpret it in a much, much different way than other species interpret it. And that has got to be our starting point, that shared reality.
Right. Okay. One of the issues that I have with these kinds of conversations is that the subject of the conversation itself is taking place outside or beyond. I don't want to say outside, but beyond observable reality. We're talking about something that may be taking place in a higher dimension, something that is taking place before the space-time continuum itself. And, obviously with a lot of these things, the belief and worldview heavily comes into play when people are forming what their hypothesis of the nature of reality is. And so I think that there's kind of a fundamental flaw in asking for empirical evidence for something.
Can I just, Josh, can I just stop you there? Josh, I don't want to, I'm sorry to interrupt. I will let you continue just a second. Neither myself or Ben have insisted on empirical evidence. I said, I don't know if you've been listening to the show, but I've said on at least one occasion tonight that I am happy to accept philosophical proof. I'm not just an empiricism guy. I'm happy. The thing that seems to be confusing me with kind of what you're saying, if we assume that we do have this shared reality, and I'm pretty confident, we don't need to go into it, but I'm pretty confident that we agree that we have a shared reality, as I related before. The thing for me is whether a God exists outside of that is irrelevant largely until we have a good reason to kind of believe that a God exists outside of that. And that by and large, would necessitate either proof or evidence to that is the case. Otherwise, what is the good reason for our belief? Because it sounds like we're kind of getting into the thing of, We're just going back to the call from earlier on tonight where he just said, well, I just kind of feel it's the case. And that's not a methodology. We don't have a measurable yardstick to kind of take into account in any way, shape, or form. So while and believe it or not, I largely agree with a lot of what you're saying. But the vital question that comes out of that is, what reason do we have to believe that God exists in reality? Not what, and this is very, very important again, not what reason do we have to believe in God, because that is a different question. The question I'm specifically asking is what do we have that is good evidence that God, or a good reason to believe that God exists in reality?
Well, and can I jump in here really quick? Like something for me here too. Like you bring up the what if God's in a different dimension or a different plane or like something like that. And like honestly, like if there's something supernatural that exists in some other dimension that we don't know about, like I don't really care about the question. That's kind of what I consider to be mental masturbation. Like it's fun to think about and have a thought experiment. But the important thing is, like, even if you believe, and I don't know your exact position on this, so you can correct me in a second if you don't think this. But the issue for me is when people use that argument to say, well, but God's timeless, outside of time, outside of space, all that. So that's why we can't pinpoint where he is or like what he's doing. Like we can't use evidence to prove that he exists. But this deity also intervenes with our reality and has impact. And so that's the thing. Like if you're going to say that there is a deity or some supernatural being that is acting upon our reality, and we see like signs of this, we should, like, that's, even if the God is residing on a different plane, you are making the claim then that there is impact on this reality, and that should be able to be measured. Right? Like, and that's where there's a disconnect.
Okay,
And that's why this kind of argument makes me think it's a lazy response to say, well, but he's just outside of space and time, so that's why we can't prove him. But if he intervenes with our reality, we should have some way to note that there is intervention happening.
Okay, well, okay, so my conception of God is a little bit more rooted in Eastern religions, like things like the Tao, and just sort of the idea of a consciousness that we are capable of participating in. And I don't really like the anthropomorphizing of God, to where we're picturing, a man sitting on a cloud with a beard saying, let there be light. There's some deity that lives somewhere else that's a supernatural creature that is consciously affecting our reality according to some sort of set of whims or whatever it may be. I think that, that's...
So, Josh, does
God is very... Well, hold on.
Hold on. Because I want to address the points before we just add more. And I feel bad that I have to stop you. But here's the thing. Like, I don't want to get too far into more and more claims when we can address this one here. But because this is an important question. Do you think, like, with your perception of what like consciousness or God or whatever term you want to use for it is, do you think that it impacts our reality, or that we have impact on? Do you think that there is a relationship between what we do and what that consciousness is? Like, is there a way for these to impact each other?
Yes.
Okay, so that should be able to be demonstrated, right? If there is impact, we should be able to see evidence of impact.
Well, there is evidence of impact. However, it's not...
So give it to us.
It's very subjective types of evidence. I mean, if you're talking about a shared reality...
Then how is it evidence if it's subjective? Like, I mean, I get that you can have some subjective evidence. Hold on, let me reframe that, because there are things that are subjective that can be useful, but they're not useful in isolation. It's useful with other factors as well, like pain. Like I can be in pain and my pain is subjective, but we can still measure things that would cause me to have pain. Like, so is there, like, because my thought is, like, if these things are interacting with each other, like, how could you have something interacting with something else and then not have demonstrable impact? And I think, like, you can have feelings, of impact, but is that what give it to me? What do you think is wrong?
The flaw with that is the only way to measure the difference between the impact is to have a control variable. So you would have to measure what reality would be without that impact.
Right. So that's not a flaw. That's pointing that no, Josh. But do you not understand? Like, that's a flaw with the claim, because it's unfalsifiable, right? Because if there's not a way for us to determine what this impact is, it's an unfalsifiable claim, so we can't investigate it. But that doesn't mean that we can just therefore believe it, right? So that's a flaw with the claim, and not a flaw with the argument I'm making.
This kind of still goes back to what I said before, that the whole subject of this conversation is not existing within observable physical reality. You're talking about something it's affecting
that observable physical reality. Like, there is something that is impacting you in your life, and you're expecting to make changes based on this belief. So, like, if there is but if there isn't impact, if there isn't something that's impacting the observable physical reality, then why do we care about it? That's where I'm at. Like, if it's not affecting us, then why do we even need to go down that route? And if it is, how can we demonstrate that it's there?
I don't agree with the framing that it's something affecting us. I think that we are part of it. So this is what I want to talk about: consciousness.
Josh, part of what? Because earlier on you kind of alluded to Eastern religions and specifically mentioned Tao. Now, Tao, as far as I'm aware, and I might be wrong, I've done a little bit of study into it, but not a great deal, is not a conscious living being. It's supposedly this kind of all enveloping force that is throughout the universe, but it's not conscious. Although consciousness can interact with it. But I'm wondering what exactly it is that this God is, and how you're saying, it interacts with us in certain ways, but you don't really seem to be giving us those ways. How first of all, how can we measure that interaction? And secondly, how do we know that that interaction is a conscious thing that we are interacting with?
So think about it like this. The more we evolve, the more consciousness we possess, right? So we started as...
No, I don't accept that. I don't accept that.
Well, you haven't even heard the argument that I'm trying to make.
No, but you just made a claim, though, that as we evolve, the more consciousness we get, and I don't accept that at all. I don't accept that there's a more consciousness to even get. Like, I'm very confused. Josh, you're throwing around a lot of words that just, like, they sound nice and they sound profound, but, like, what does any of it mean? Like, how does consciousness get impacted by evolution? Like, I'm very confused.
So I'm trying to formulate an argument here.
Well, you're trying to formulate an argument, but you started off by saying evolution, as we evolve, we gain more consciousness, right? As if I'm supposed to agree with that before we go on to the rest of the argument. And I don't agree with that.
Okay.
So let's call that the first premise of your argument. So Oh, if let's say, can you set your argument out in a syllogistic form? Because that'll allow us to, rather than just you getting upset because we're interrupting you, which we don't want to upset you, we want a conversation. Set your argument out in a syllogistic form and actually let us respond to each part. So let's call that the first part of it. If we say that's the first point, the evolution means that as we evolve, we're getting more conscious. And we disagree with that. So how would you argue against that and substantiate that point?
Well, can you explain to me what about that claim you disagree with?
I don't know if there's different like evolutions of consciousness or ways that consciousness can extend or improve. I don't know. I don't know how to compare different consciousnesses. I don't know how we would demonstrate that. I don't have any reason to believe that consciousness changes with evolution.
Right.
How are you demonstrating that claim, Josh? How are you demonstrating the consciousness
of
Josh?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
So the general notion of how life started on Earth is that it started as single-celled organisms. Yeah.
I'll give you that.
That's correct, right?
I'd give you that, but I don't know how.
So a single-celled organism.
Yeah, but I don't know what that has to do with consciousness. I don't know how we would demonstrate consciousness along this pathway.
A single-celled organism has no perception. It has no perceptive awareness from an anatomical sense. So it doesn't have sight or hearing or really a nervous system or memory or the ability to imagine or make predictions or any of these things.
I mean, I don't know how we would know whether a single-celled organism does or does not have perception abilities. Like, I don't know how we would demonstrate that, other than the only thing we can really, the only thing that we can investigate is whether or not they have certain anatomical features or certain things that we would relate to certain processes. But again, like, there might be a different process that they undergo that we don't have, and we just don't know about it. So I don't know if I can grant that, because there's just so much that I don't know. And I don't know if we can know, honestly.
Okay. Well, what about language? You think that language is a good indicator of a level of consciousness?
No. Language is not an indicator of levels. Because number one, I don't accept levels of consciousness. I don't accept that being a thing. But also, like, language is related to different, like, areas of your brain communicating with each other and then communicating with these structures in your face to produce these sound and to your larynx and all that to produce sounds, and then for another person to receive those sounds and interpret them. But I think that it's maybe, and I don't know like a whole lot about the nuances of that, but there are plenty of animals and other organisms that have the ability to communicate via body language and through other things. Like probably the difference there is
but they can't have
more related to anatomical difference and brain structure differences. But I don't think that the language is related to a level of consciousness. I don't think the consciousness is different. I think the anatomical and neurophysiological structures and processes maybe are different. But I don't have any way to, like, I don't see how you could suggest that language is related to a consciousness level.
If I might just jump in 1 second, because I don't want us to be talking past each other. Is your argument, and it might just be a difference in word usage here, so I just want to try and clarify a little bit. Could it be that you're arguing that intelligence has evolved rather than consciousness?
Well, I would say that it's both. Intelligence and consciousness aren't quite the same thing, but the level of intelligence would suggest that there is a heightened potential for awareness and understanding. So for us to have a conversation like this about the nature of the fabric of reality itself, we have to be on we have to possess more consciousness to be even be able to formulate these types of arguments and participate in a discussion like this.
Well, so, there again, you're still equating then consciousness and intelligence, because I don't see why consciousness would give you that, whereas I think Richard and I would say that intelligence more relates to that, but you threw in the word consciousness again. So I think you're going back and forth between terms.
So here's the thing.
Yeah, what is the thing?
We have these faculties that are generated by our brains, but and a certain level of intelligence allows us to explore a conscious existence more thoroughly. So none of that is even really central to what I'm trying to say. The idea that consciousness is something that we possess, and of course this is not scientific at all. I don't have evidence for it. It's simply a belief. That consciousness is something that we are able to gain rather than something that we are generating.
So that's a legitimate conversation to have. That is a legitimate conversation to have, and there are conversations around it in lots of different fields, in psychology, in neuroscience, in philosophy. There are conversations to be had around that. So why is it that you have that opinion? Let's kind of cut to the chase and get to why you have that opinion that consciousness is not necessarily coming from as a byproduct from our brains and nervous system, because I think this is the argument you're trying to make, and is something that could be outside of us that we're interacting with.
Yes. Yeah. A couple of things. Well, first of all, we had talked about subjective experience of reality. And this is not something that's measurable, but things like meditation practice. When you are capable of entering a meditative state where your thoughts and your emotions are set aside, to where you become completely thoughtless, you experience a state of pure consciousness without your mind interacting with it. And this is something that's measurable. I mean, they've shown in fMRI brain scan type studies on Buddhist monks that when they enter a meditative state, their brainwave pattern becomes completely different.
Well, yeah, well, we're talking, if we're looking at a brain in like states of relaxation or states where you're not as aware of the processing that's going on in your brain, like I could accept that, but to say that now equates to a pure consciousness, like you're taking things that are demonstrable in reality and then adding these layers that we can't verify at all and just saying that they're related. And I'm very confused about why you need to add on these extra layers instead of saying, well, hey, we noticed brain changes in people that meditate. Why is that? And like, there's some good questions to be had there. But then you add these like unverifiable layers to it, and I don't even know. Like, I'm still confused about what consciousness is. But what is a pure consciousness, or like a level of pure consciousness? That's just meaningless word salad to me.
No, I fully understand why that sounds like woo. It sounds like nothing. It sounds like nothing to someone who has never put.
So why can't we?
Can I just I think it's really important I interject at this point and say that I have been doing Buddhist meditation for over 20 years, and I am very, very familiar with the Buddhist suttas. So I am very familiar with this idea. What I'm not familiar with is the jumping from it being a human state that we can kind of, a brain state that we can kind of achieve. So it is an outside consciousness which is entering us. That there is a disconnect there that I am not getting whatsoever. I fully accept I have been in deep meditative states and very relaxing, very happy states through meditation many times. I've lost sense of time. I've had different feelings. I've lost. I'm trying to think of the actual the technical terms that we would use for mystical experience in religious studies. These ideas that what we encounter is kind of sacred, and we have these are proper things described by Stace, a guy called Stace, who is believed to be the leading kind of authority in mystical experiences through kind of meditative states and things. So he describes 6 dimensions of mystical experience, and I'm very loosely using the term mystical here because I don't believe there's any supernatural element to it whatsoever. Sacredness, which is a sense that is what is encountered is kind of sacred and feels good. A noetic quality. So it gives you kind of a feeling of meaning and a sense of encountering something beyond yourself. Positive mood and a joyful feeling. The experience, it's difficult to put into word because it's a direct experience. It can feel paradoxical to our normal everyday experience, and it can feel transcendent of space and time. It feels like time stands still. These are all feelings that are experienced during meditative states. None of those things, to me, give any indication whatsoever of an outside consciousness or an higher power. They all have the feeling that's the case. But for example, I can sit in meditation for 10 minutes and feel like I've been meditating for 4 or 5 hours. But when I look at the clock, when I come out of that meditation, I have indeed been sat there for 10 minutes. The feeling is different from the reality of it. So how are we getting what kind of, and this comes back to the question I asked you earlier, what measure, what yardstick, what is independent that we're giving that is actually measuring this thing as an actual experience, as an actual thing, a measurable thing rather than just an experience? Because just feeling like we're interacting with an outside consciousness is not evidence of interacting with an outside consciousness. And it comes back to that very, very important question I asked near the beginning of this call. And how are we evidencing that this thing exists in reality rather than just evidencing the belief? Because I can evidence the belief. I could evidence the belief that my 10-minute meditation session has taken 8 hours by saying I felt like it took 8 hours. That is evidence of the belief because it felt to me. My personal experience is evidence that it felt to me like that's the case, but it is not evidence that occurred in reality, because we can have an outside yardstick for that. And it comes back to what I said right at the beginning of this call when you asked me about what I thought reality was. We have a shared reality, and almost every person on this planet agrees with that shared reality. And then there are claims made above and beyond that. How are we measuring those things as being true in reality rather than just being believed to be true? And that's a very, very important distinction.
Well, this is, like I said before, this is the subject of the entire conversation of itself is not, it's not taking place in measurable reality. That's the subject of the conversation is beyond what is measurable.
So why do we believe it's a real thing then? Why do we believe it exists at all? And it's not just a case of it's a feeling within us. Let's take the time element of it. It's a feeling within us because that's something we can measure. Why should we believe that we've been sat in meditation for 6 hours when in actual fact it's only 10 minutes to everything we have in this shared reality, which we can use to confirm it? everything says it's been 10 minutes, but we have this feeling within us that it's been 6 hours. Why do we trust the feeling over all those measuring things, all those measuring devices we have, all of this shared reality? Because it's very easy to say, well, it's this ultimate reality that's beyond it, that and this is the only way to connect to it. But there's no way to say that we do not have a good reason to think that is the case. We have reason to believe it's an experience, and it is an experience, but we don't have a good reason to say that it is reality itself.
So I'm forced to wonder. It seems like, I mean, this channel is called the Atheist Experience, and there seems to be a lot of just very adamantly arguing against any subject of spirituality, even though the basis of your argument is that you don't know if there's a God.
We haven't, Josh, Josh, can I just correct you? We haven't argued once against an alternative reality. What we have done is asked for evidence for that reality. And that is a very, very different thing. Both myself and Ben, I believe, I know Ben well enough to say we are open to these things being real. But there needs to be good reasons to believe that these things are real, rather than just statements that these things are real. And we've encountered it on call after call tonight, where people have said, well, I feel that that's the case. That is not a good reason. That is demonstrably not a good reason to believe it. That's demonstratable, because we can take 6 people with 6 different feelings about how they are sure that their experience of reality is something beyond this measurable one that we have. And yet in every case, they contradict each other. There's no external way of measuring them. The very, 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 very best we can say is that one of them might be true, but we have no good reason to distinguish that one of them is true. And that's the very best. Anybody who genuinely cares about what is true, that is the very best they can say. And I would not argue against one of those realities being true unless I had specific evidence or specific proof against one of those realities being true. And in some cases, in some of these cases, there is that. But just to say, oh, there's this kind of this thing beyond this vague thing beyond us, which we can connect to, which is called reality, which you've got to be a certain state to, and you've got to experience. That doesn't tell us anything about whether it is actually true. As much as you believe it, as much as it feels good, as much as you are in a state of ecstasy, whether through meditation or some kind of religious practice or some kind of drug, whether no matter how much it feels real, that is not a good reason to believe it is real, when everything else we have in this shared reality does not confirm it.
Well, how do you account for consensus in those experiences? There's a decent amount.
There is no. Okay, that brilliant. There is no consensus in these experiences. What there is what we've got. We've got scientific papers on this. We have actual scientific papers on this, and when you look at those scientific papers, you will see that the authors cherry pick. They cherry pick what they want mystical experiences to contain. They dismiss cultural aspects. So I've literally just given you the 6 kind of things that Stace came up with: sacredness, noetic quality, deeply positive moods, ineffability, paradoxicality, and transcendence of time and space. They are these things that across these mystical experiences, people kind of seem to experience, whether it's through taking drugs or through meditation or whatever. They seem to experience these things. But when you look at different aspects, they experience other things as well. You know, things that are particular to their religion. Some people might be attributing it to Allah. Some people might be attributing it to Vishnu. Some people might be attributing it to the Tao or the Dharma or whatever. But there are slightly different things within those experiences. They aren't all exactly the same. And do you know how supporters of these things deal with this? They just dismiss the bits that don't match, and they take the ones that do and use them. And all the things that don't match, they hand wave them away as some kind of cultural phenomena or phenomena specific to that religion. So what they're saying is, well, you're experiencing, let's say the Tao. You're experiencing the Tao, and that has a particular experience which is different from the experience of Buddhist meditation. But because it doesn't match this criteria where they all match, we're going to dismiss that part. That's really bad practice. That is awful, awful practice when you're going to cherry pick the criteria you're using to get a result so you get that result. That's really, really bad practice. I don't condone that in any way, shape, or form. I can talk about all my meditative experience has been specifically from a Buddhist aspect. And I can talk about the 4 jhanas and the subtle kind of, in Buddhism, you have what's called the 4 jhanas, that are kind of 4 subtle states of meditative awareness that take you through on different things. These would be dismissed. The very subtle states, they're talking about a lot of what you've talked about, but they would be dismissed because they don't fit into this encompassing criteria that everybody who has these mystical experiences, so-called mystical experiences, share. So they're dismissed. That's bad practice, sir. That is really, really bad practice. And I'm going to let Ben have a word because I've been talking forever.
No, but that's kind of where I was going to. It's like are these experiences the same? And if not, what are the differences? But also, like, there are certain things that could potentially be factors as well. And so this is again a case where I can't make the leap to this is something supernatural. At most I can say is I could say this is potentially a coincidence. It could be that there's some cultural aspect that is overlapping with these people. Maybe there's sleep deprivation, maybe there's a substance. Like, there's so many variables that we haven't worked through. And I can't really say that I would be confident in any particular answer, but there are plenty of things we need to go through before we get to supernatural.
So I disagree with the framing of God as something that's supernatural.
So hold on. You say that you disagree with it being supernatural, but this whole time you've been talking about consciousness in different dimensions or things that so I think when we're talking about supernatural, we're saying things that are outside of that observable reality, which you had said that your spiritual belief is something outside of that. So that's what we mean. Yeah, maybe.
Well, to me,
maybe this. Yeah.
To me, like it would just be considered part of the fabric of reality. And I mean, in theoretical physics, mathematically they have shown that higher dimensions work in a mathematical sense. So
that's all theory, though, right? That's all theory, and theory is great. But theory is, there's a lot of things that we can't really translate into practical use and practical reality. And there's a lot of debate that goes on in the fields of theoretical mathematics and theoretical physics. It's a reason it's theoretical. But I think maybe we need to have more conversations in a different call because we've been going for a while. But here's what my problem with a lot of this argument is. There's a lot of flowery and kind of wishy-washy definitions, and we'll try to go down a certain path, and then you'll take it somewhere kind of completely different but kind of the same, and then add some other terms that aren't really related. And there's just a lot going on, and I think maybe next time we talk we need to break it down into smaller components and address things individually, because like at least from my perspective, it's been this ride of just like adding more and more layers to this thing and not really addressing any of them.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to that, Josh, before we let you go, if you can, when you come, if you call back again, please do call back again, because I have genuinely enjoyed this conversation. This is right up my alley, and I don't get to talk about this stuff very often. If you do call back again, please try and form a syllogistic argument so we can address each point by point, rather than kind of going down these rabbit trails. It makes it much easier to have these conversations. I'm going to let you go, Josh. Thank you very much for your call. I genuinely enjoyed that.